Hi, we'll just give people a little bit more time to get into the webinar and then we'll get started. Okay, and we're good to go. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Dipo Josikoka, your product marketing manager here at MadCap Software. I'll be your host for today, introducing our presenters, handling logistics and QA at the end of the webinar. In today's episode 1, we're joined by MadCap CEO Anthony Olivier. Hi, Anthony. Consultant Content Strategy, Leslie Farinella. MadCap Software's VP Industry Solutions, Dale Walden. And MadCap Software's Director of Documentation and Technical Writing Expert, Paul Stacklin. Just before we start, let's do some housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, so if you can't make it to the end, you will receive a link to the recording, or if you want to watch it again, look out for that email. We'll be sending that link out to everyone. At the end of the webinar, we will have a Q&A session, so feel free to type your questions into the question panel throughout the webinar, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. If we do run out of time, however, we'll be sure to send you answers to your questions by email, along with a link to the recording soon after the webinar ends. Let's quickly go through the On24 interface. Some of you might be joining us for the first time on this platform. What you're currently seeing me in is what is termed the media player. You can move the media player around, minimize it, maximize it, or set it to even to display full screen. Hover your mouse over the media player, and at the top right, you will see icons that you can use to perform the desired action. The same controls are available for the slides player, which is which is in the center of your screen. The slides panel just does just what it says on the tin. It displays whatever presentations we're showing to you. It's resizable. You can choose to have it half and half, or just slide it over to one side if you want to focus on the media player. The resources panel is on the top right and contains links to content that you'll find useful in your research, as well as a link to our new AI portal. Make sure you go and visit that. The questions panel is displayed just below that, and that's where you can type in your questions, and you can also move and resize it if you need more real estate on your screen to see the presentations. Note, though, that when you type in your question, you will only see your own question. You won't see questions from other people that have typed in questions. Finally, at the bottom of this browser window, there are control icons for each of the panels I've just described. So if you do lose one of them, if you lose the media player or one of the other players, just click on the icon and bring that back up. There's also a link to the On24 platform online help that you can use if you are having any particular issues. Now, preparing for AI in content development and management is a 5-part series where we'll be presenting MadCap Software's vision of the AI revolution in content development and management. Over the course of the series, you will hear from MadCap leadership about our AI strategy and roadmap. You'll hear from product chiefs and owners about how they're implementing this strategy, and from many other actors who are experts in the field of technical documentation and learning and development, who are able to speak on this subject from the user's point of view. This is important because we're developing software for you to work harder, to work smarter, not harder. Each episode will focus on one or more prongs of our approach with thoughts and practical examples and demonstrations of our ecosystem of solutions for small, medium, and large-scale enterprises. One of our key messages is that you need to prepare for AI, and if you're not already doing so, you will be left behind. Make sure you sign up to follow the series and see, like, episode 2, which is coming up in September, and see how MadCap's innovative solutions are being set up to be a leader in the AI revolution. Remember, I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A panel, so if there are any technical issues, you can also pop them in there and I'll try and resolve them in the background. Enough waffling. Let's get down to the reason you're all here today. Take it away, Leslie. Oh, and sorry, this is Anthony.
No problem. Thank you, Deepa. Can everybody hear me okay? You guys hear me okay? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, welcome everybody. My name is Anthony Olivier, as Deepa mentioned, CEO of MadCap Software. Super excited to share, what MadCap's strategy is around AI. And we actually have a three-pronged approach in terms of how we're tackling AI to make sure that we're focusing on all aspects of AI, as well as regardless of what type of customer you are, whether you're a small customer, you're a medium customer, or you're a very large enterprise. And we've broken it down into three aspects or three-pronged approach or core areas around AI that we're going to be focusing on from a strategy perspective. The first one is content access, right? So as we all know, like content, only adds value once it's consumed, right? So part of our content access strategy around AI is ensuring that your proprietary content is high octane fuel for AI, making sure that your content is available to AI tools. Structured content is a solid format, right? And it's a solid foundation. But now how do you take your content and further enhance that by ensuring it is AI ready? Deliver content as a service to fuel large language models using APIs and access any other third-party AI tools. Your content can be consumed by those AI tools. That's content access. The second core area is content intelligence, right? How do we use AI to group your content, improve your content, improve navigation, better support your users, your end users of the documentation? How do we use AI to make it easier for people to find relevant content, find precise content around things like semantic search, content recommendations, and more of the like of that. So more of the content intelligence. Now, as Deepa mentioned, we're going to be digging into each of these through subsequent webinars. Episode 2 is really digging into content access. What are we doing exactly to make sure your content is ready to consume by AI tools? Episode 3 in October, content intelligence, and digging into the features and functionality around that. And episode 4 is the content assistant, which is our third prong, which how to use AI to augment the authoring process. Now, you've seen over the last 5-6 months or so, we really started to add those features in various products. We added, ChatGPT integration with Central from the authoring process. Paul, our documentation director, is going to be talking about that. We added Positron using Oxygen in our XSCMS product. And what are we doing on the Xylem side with Syndicate and Create as well? So how do you use AI to augment authoring, to enhance your content, restructure your content, and just make the authoring process more efficient in general? And that's really our three-pronged agenda or approach to AI. And super excited to share the details of that. And now I'll pass it on to Leslie, who will dig in a little bit more detail.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Before we dig into the details, though, we think it's really important to step back and to look at what's the business problem we're trying to solve. Because one of the problems with AI that I think all of you are seeing is it's this big, shiny object that can be a distraction. So we really need to set our North Star as to what is it we're trying to accomplish to AI. And you'll see that in the strategy that Anthony laid out. So here in MadCap, for the last decade, we've really been working to improve job performance. And with the acquisition of Xylem, brought in the learning to that as well. So both the technical documentation and the learning, but always at the end of the day to make sure that people have the information they need when and where they need it in order to do their job and to be successful. So let's talk today within that context. So some of the things that we've been hearing as we talk to customers within the MadCap universe is that they want to use AI to resolve issues faster. through the search that Anthony was talking about. Use AI to be able to connect people and get them right to that information they need so that they can solve problems and move on. One of the other things that's really exciting about AI is the ability to bring different pieces of information together, because we all know that right now we have different repositories. Sometimes the information is disconnected, sometimes it's in different documents. So AI really has the power for us to start to bring that information together in one place so people can have all of that to solve problems. Also, to personalize content. So if we think about onboarding and upskilling and reskilling people, lots of people have different experiences. They already have different skills. Not everybody needs the same thing. So be able to personalize those experiences to the individuals so that we can be much more efficient and get people back on the job and successful faster. The other thing we're really excited when we talk customer care about is this ability to start to look at providing people the information they need hopefully right at the moment they're about to make a mistake, to almost anticipate or make sure that information is available so quickly that when they make an error, they can fix it very quickly. So what we're really, if we can encapsulate all that down to, is really being able to match people and content together and to improve that knowledge capture, because we know it's really that knowledge transfer across the organization and allowing people to get to what they need quickly. And AI has a huge impact in this area. So there's a challenge. The problem is that when we think about everything I just talked about, all those great things we want to accomplish, the out of the box, those open general models, they can't help you because they don't have your proprietary information. They don't know about your product. They don't know about your services. They don't have your procedures. They don't have your policies. So those general models are not going to be sufficient. What we're going to need to think about is how then do we bring your proprietary information, your secret sauce into that? And that's really where we see that MadCap is going to become a part of your strategic foundation to your AI strategy, because we all know that content management is going to be core to any AI strategy. So those of you out there that are already doing content management, pat yourself on the back because you're ahead of the game. Those of you that haven't yet, it's not too late. We're still kind of in that in-between time, but now's the time, because if you wait, it's going to be harder and harder to catch up. So when we think about making your content, your proprietary content, AI ready, we need to think about a couple of things. One is a single source of truth, and that needs to be accurate. So just think a minute. Are you going to want to put AI against your SharePoint site? Likely not, because there's a lot, as you know, we all have been in there. There's a lot of good and bad. So garbage in, garbage out still applies. So we're going to have a single source of truth, and we're going to have to be able to access that. So we're going to talk later about access and having those APIs to be able to get to that content. Now, AI does well with unstructured content, so that's good. But you know what? If your content is well structured and it has metadata against it, it helps you to refine those searches. It really adds that rocket fuel that could really make it much more targeted to get that right piece of content to that right person and make that more relevant. And we all know when we start dealing with our proprietary content and internal processes, the idea of governance. So through access control, am I allowed to see this content? Just because AI has the answer doesn't mean I'm allowed to have that answer. And also traceability. Where did this content come from? Was it AI generated? Was it human generated? Was it AI generated and human approved? When was it last updated? Who approved it? So that traceability and understanding the source and how that content is evolved is going to be very important, particularly to any of you who do anything with regulatory or compliance. And then we're going to need some flexibility in this, because we all don't have the answers. We don't know how AI is going to play out. So making sure whatever solution that you put in place is flexible and you can adapt as this evolves is going to be important. So really this content management is that foundational strategic capability that you need to put in place in order to deliver on any AI strategy. So we're going to dig in now that I've set kind of that stage in the North Star, and we're going to talk about content access. So let's dig in. We love to start with content access because, again, start with the business and the learner in mind, because content really has value at the point that you can get into the hands of the learner and the user. And part of what we know is that content's hard to find, right? There's lots of statistics on how many hours we all waste in a week looking to find content. So if AI can help us to get to that content faster, that's a huge win for the business. The other is being able to get the content when and where I need it. So be able to pull that content into the applications that I'm already working with, into my issue resolution session software, into Salesforce, into my learning platforms, being able to pull that in so that I don't have to, as a user, go someplace and come back in order to get the answers that I need. And the other is that connecting the content to really what I need, knowing who I am, what's my profile, what product, what region, what experience do I have, and being really smart about that AI retrieval, being able to grab the content and bring it where it is. And all of that will start to drive productivity. So if we think about what's going to be required from more a technical perspective around that content and that data flow between those systems, is one thing about AI is you're going to have to start thinking about content as a service even more than before. And that you're not going to want to have a lot of different content repositories. So the extent that you can bring those together in a single repository, and that repository can feed content out into your ecosystem. Because one of the things that we're seeing is a lot of the platforms that you use, Salesforce, your LMS, your issue resolution system, they're going to put AI into it, but you still need to bring your proprietary content into those systems. So the ability to feed your content into those from a single source is going to be huge, because you're not going to want those silos and duplication. We've never wanted them, but with AI in the mix, particularly with the maintenance and what you're going to need to do to manage that in an AI world, you're definitely not going to want to do it across those multiple content silos. So you need to bring that content together. And being able to apply that metadata, and Dale's going to talk more about why that's important, but being able to apply that at that single source, and that metadata can then go downstream into those systems as well, is going to be critical. And then obviously APIs is going to be a key thing in order to be able to connect those systems together. And I'm not going to get into Rack. I'm going to pass it over to Dale, and I'm going to let him dig into these in more detail. So over to you, Dale.
Sure. Thanks, Leslie. So as Leslie was saying, it's really important to get your content, your proprietary content, into your AI systems, wherever they're being used. But before you worry about how to connect those systems together, you should be looking at your actual content. So Leslie also mentioned that AI can handle the unstructured content, it can handle duplicate content. But if you're going to get the most out of it, you really want to make sure that your content is in an efficiently tagged format, a structured format, so that it can better read it. So for example, I call this giving your content meaning. So your content has meaning to the person who's reading it. But when you're talking about computer systems, it's a little bit different. AI bridges that gap really well, but you have to give your AI model context clues as to what something is or what its purpose is. And the first way you can do that is just by adding structure. So structure could be as little as adding proper white space, giving white space between paragraphs, new lines, putting titles on their own line, indenting list items. All of those little things that we kind of take for granted actually give us context clues as to the purpose of the text itself. Because the AI is really good at understanding what the text is, but it's also good at understanding those context clues that normally we do. We run through our brains as humans, but that a normal computer system wouldn't really do. So the first thing to do is add structure. But what you can do more is add structured language around your content. So for example, XML is a structured language. HTML, what the web is built on, is a structured language. And what that means is that you're giving specifically semantic meaning to the words that are in the content. So for example, if you wanted to say that this is a heading, just like on this slide, making your content AI ready, well, in HTML, you would surround that text with a tag of H1, which means heading 1, the most important heading. AI will understand what that means and understand, okay, this is an important point. This, the summary of all of the content that comes after this is this text right here, making your content AI ready. So using a structured language will really, really help you in getting more out of your AI models when you're putting your content in there. But even more is metadata around that. So semantically describing your content is great, and it will really help the efficiency of the AI model to give proper responses. But what's even better is metadata related to that. So if you have, for example, some text related to a specific product or a specific application, and you've got it structured, all the headings and paragraph tags and images are properly semantically tagged out. Now you can start to say, well, this is a product. This article is about a product. And you can do that through classifications, tags, taxons, labels. You can do that in a lot of different ways, but it's metadata that you're applying to the content itself that describes in the larger scheme of things, what is this thing? And you can also do it for skill level, time required to complete in the case of an assessment or an activity. All of those things are very important to give context clues to the AI model so that when it has to respond with something based on that content, it can provide the best answer. Another piece of metadata that can be helpful is last updated dates. Is this content up to date? Is it fresh or is it outdated? Has it not been touched in 10 years, for example? So metadata about the content management process around the content is also very useful. How many people have touched this content? How often is this content distributed to audiences? All of that is really important as well to give context clues and making sure your AI models can respond with the most accurate response. But one other thing we can do is give your content life. And I don't mean actually make it alive, but help the AI model understand how it's being used, who's using it, when it's being used. And you can do that by connecting it to usage data. So you can do this in a number of different ways. Sorry, here we go. You can do this in a number of different ways, but one really easy way to do this is to capture the interactions with your content. Who is looking at your content? What are they doing with that content? In the case of learning and development, did they complete a test? Did they pass the test or fail it? What questions did they get wrong? Are those questions consistently being failed by users? Maybe that question is too difficult. Maybe it doesn't match the source content. And you can get those analytics, those interaction data in a number of different ways. One way that we've adopted in L&D is called the Experience API, or XAPI for short. And that is a system which basically, or excuse me, a schema, which basically allows you to describe to a database when something happens in your content. And what it captures is the verb, what happened, the object, what it happened to, the actor, who acted upon it, and then you can also collect other data as well. But those are the main things. So that could be interacting with content. It can be interacting with an application. It could be interacting with a physical object in the real world. All you need to do is send that what's called statement. Dale Walden clicked on this button at this time. Now you've got life connected to that content. And the AI models can connect those things together. AI models, if you provide a schema for interactions or analytics or what have you, and you give it consistent source data, and they can tie those two together. Let's say it has the same ID. So your content has an ID, and that ID is referenced in that interaction statement. Now your AI model really understands how are these pieces of content being used? How can they be improved? What audiences is doing the best or using this content to the best of their ability, because it can know more about who's interacting with it. The possibilities are endless, and it's really, really powerful to be able to connect those two concepts together when you think about something like a content recommendation engine, right? That can be AI powered, but that can be super powered by your AI model if it has a clear understanding of what your content is, who is using it, and about more of those users. The more information you give it, maybe you connect it to an HR system, the better it can work. So giving this data to AI models is, yes, it's very important, but it's also really important to make sure that the data is well-defined, well-described, and is sufficient. Make sure you give it as much data as possible so that it can make the choices and make the decisions that you would expect it to make as an efficient model. One of the ways that can be done is through a method called retrieval augmented generation. And that is kind of a mouthful. That's why you'll hear it called RAG for short. And what this is doing is really clever and really powerful. So let's assume that you go to Bing Copilot or ChatGPT, and you ask it a question about your business process at your company. It may or may not know what it is you're talking about, right? And that's because probably that business process has not been documented on the public internet. So what retrieval augmented generation does is it provides a middleman between the end user and that large language model, that chatbot, that can better inform the chatbot's response, the LLM's response, and constrain it to certain ideas. And so you may think that, or you may have thought, in order for my company to get our proprietary content in a large language model, we have to train a large language model on our content. You can do that. Normally, what you would do is you would kind of take a branch off of an existing LLM like ChatGPT, and you would add to it. But that's really time consuming, and it takes a lot of manpower, and it takes a lot of upkeep. So if you think about you've trained that AI system, that large language model on your proprietary content, what happens in a year when that content is out of date? Do you have to, again, train it? And the answer is yes, probably, because it will get out of date. What RAG is the middleman that can be up to date without having to retrain the model. So the reason behind RAG is to give your models better information to make decisions in their responses and constrain them. But if you think about what a CCMS is or an LCMS, that is a massive source of data for those AI models. Imagine if you could have Copilot or ChatGPT attached to your proprietary LCMS or CCMS content. Now you've got a gold mine. And I want to show you an example. These are screenshots of a couple of LLM chatbots. I won't name them. But I just asked it the question about MadCap Xylene documentation. How can I create a multiple choice question element in Xylene's create application? And you can see that both of these chatbots gave back very substantial and confident answers, but they're both completely wrong. Neither of these is consistent. Neither of them are consistent with the application. This is actually not how you do that, not in the slightest. In fact, the themes are totally foreign to Xylene's create application. And that's because it was making that decision based on the data that it was trained on. And if you're familiar with kind of AI jargon, we would call that a hallucination. It made that answer up because it felt like it had to answer. It understood the words you said, and it took an amalgamation of information from its trained data and put together that answer, which maybe in some universe works for some application, but not Xylene Create. So now let's look at this using RAG in between. So we've got your LLM. It's the same type of LLM, same type of chatbot, but now we have a RAG system in between it. I asked it the same question. And again, it gave back a substantial, confident answer. And that is absolutely correct. This is how you do that in MadCap Create. And the reason that it was able to do that was because that RAG system is a database that we attach to the Xylene LCMS. So it has all of that up-to-date documentation where we make our tech docs, make our learning documentation. That RAG system has access to that, and it was able to augment the answer that came back from the LLM. So it actually did it both ways. It augmented the request going into the LLM and augmented the answer coming out of the LLM. So it gave a perfectly correct answer based on the data that it had available. It didn't have to be retrained. It was an off-the-shelf LLM. But another thing that it did extra is that it actually provided me citations and a list of sources in this response. So I've got a list of sources here that I could go double check to make sure that the answer is correct. And a lot of tools out there will actually allow you to do this, allow you to get citations. In fact, if you use Bing Chatbot now, you'll see that sometimes when you ask it how to do something, it'll provide citations of the website that it got that information from. So they're getting a lot better at this, and they may be using RAG under the hood for that. But some tools will let you see the citations and freeze answers. So when you talk about governance, maybe this is the exact answer that I want to this question for everybody. I don't want it to be generated each time somebody asks how to create a multiple choice question. So some tools will allow you to verify this answer. And now when the chatbot gets this question, it will always provide this answer back. And those tools will often allow you to say, this is a verified answer, so that the end user and internally, everybody knows that this is true, this is verified, it works properly. So another thing that RAG can help us do with chatbots is constrain the answers. So in that first example we looked, and there were massive hallucinations where they made everything up. Well, when you have RAG, for most LLMs, you can actually constrain those answers to what's in the RAG system, the RAG database. And so, for example, here I asked that same chatbot a totally random question not related to MadCap or Xylene. Can you tell me how to care for a newborn child? Now, if I would have asked that to a normal LLM, it would probably give me a procedure or something like that, because it knows generically, based on our language, that this is the information related to the healthcare of newborn children. But in this chatbot, it's been told, don't answer anything outside of the contents of the RAG system. So in this case, it answered, I apologize, but there's no information in my knowledge base related to caring for a newborn child. And it goes on to say, contact a healthcare professional. So it understood the question because it informed you that you should contact the healthcare professional, but it knew that it couldn't answer because it didn't have the information related to that answer in the actual RAG system. And that is a really powerful concept. AI is really powerful in itself. It feels like magic, but it almost feels unwieldy a lot of times. And we need to be able to get control of it. That's the point of retrieval augmented generation, is to not just better inform the answers, but give you better confidence that the answers are going to be correct by constraining them to that RAG system. So Leslie, I'm going to pass it back to you so we can talk a little bit more about some things.
Excellent, thank you. So thank you, Dale. When we talk about access, I know that I saw a question in the chat about proprietary content. So hopefully you saw how using RAG plus the content repositories, we can pull in that proprietary content, and also how we can start to use that metadata again to connect that content to people, which has been one of the problems we've all been trying to solve for a very long time, is that findability, the discoverability, and making sure when people get that content, it's what they need when they need it. Excellent. So I'm going to dig into the next one, which is content intelligence. And when we think about content intelligence, we're going to get deeper into what I just said, that kind of like connecting that people to the right content, but understanding that many times when somebody goes to search for something, as we've all found, there's nothing there. Like, it's not that they're getting the wrong content, it's the content doesn't exist. So I know many of you are probably collecting data on searches, and searches that were successful, but importantly, searches that weren't successful. So one of the powerful things about AI is if we can start to understand what's the information that people need. So we can look at what are the strategic objectives of the business? What is the next product launch? You know, what issues are we seeing, you know, that are coming into the call center? And then we can look at our content to understand, does the information actually exist in order to answer those questions? Because when we find many times talking to customers and prospects is they don't know their own content. They don't know what they have. They don't know what's there. So step one is, do I have the content that people need? So content intelligence is about better understanding the content itself, and then being able to add that metadata. So Dale talked about why that metadata is so important, but it's interesting, we can use AI itself to help to auto tag and add that metadata that is going to help us to better map the people to their content. And then we can start to make business priorities around content development, because we all know developing content and maintaining it is a big investment. So I'm going to pass it back on to Dale to take over.
Yeah, because that information gives you incredible power to understand your content in a way that you've never been able to understand it before. I did see some questions about how can we make our content AI ready, existing content. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but I did want to mention that if your content is already in a MadCap system, whether it's Flare, Central, CCMS, or anything in Xylene, it is most of the way there already, because it's already structured, it's already well organized. But let's say we get to this point where we're trying to understand our content. We can probably best show that in this image. And what this image is we call it the content galaxy map. What it really is it's a scatter plot of topics in one of our systems. So each one of these dots is a single topic, and the way that it's organized is based on the semantic meaning of that content, of that topic. So for example, if we ran each of these topics through a model, it would actually read what's in that topic, and it would boil it down to a few numbers called embeddings. That's how AI generally works, is that it's making decisions based on numbers. And those numbers are what's informing the position of each topic on the scatter plot. And it doesn't just only work with topics. You can feed it anything, and it will read the text, and it will say, that these are the numbers that best represent the semantic meaning of that content. And that concept is incredibly powerful because there are so many uses for it. We'll talk a little bit more in a minute. But let's say you've done that for all of the topics you have in your content inventory. Now you have something like this. What do you do with it? Well, you can start to take something like a taxonomy. Maybe you have regulatory requirements to meet a certain quota of content under a certain area or certain taxon, a certain classification, but you can feed that taxonomy to the same AI model, and it will do the same thing. It will give you numbers that describe those things. So, for example, if you needed safety, content on safety, or content on HR, or content on conflict resolution, you would feed those classifications, those taxons into the same AI model, and will give you those responses back in numbers. And what you could do at that point is you could overlay that taxonomy on your content results, and you can start to see, based on this taxonomy, here's where I do and here's where I don't have content. So let's take that example of we need a certain amount of content for onboarding new customers. It's a content goal that we have in our organization. Well, maybe we have adequate coverage there. We can see that now based on onboarding new customers, we have adequate coverage of content there. But where we don't have adequate coverage is company values. And that's important to onboarding new employees. So we need to focus our efforts on looking at company values, making new content there to make it available for onboarding new employees. And this taxonomy is just an example. It could be anything you want. And you can basically see the content that I have in my content inventory is representative of my company's values, my organization's values, or if we need to improve somewhere. So that's what we've been talking about is this first bit shows you what content you have. And then this bit shows you what content you need. And this can be entirely flexible to your organization's needs. It's not something that's pre-built. And I just think that's a really exciting concept because there are so many ways that we can use this information. So that was showing you based on a taxonomy how much content you have, but those same numbers that I talked about, embeddings, that AI boils your content down into is just a few numbers. Those same numbers can be used for a number of applications. So one of them is duplication, analysis, and remediation. Do I have a lot of duplicate content in my content inventory, or is my content useful and leverages reuse? So for example, it wouldn't be a text compare. Like, yes, you could say, copy the text from one topic and go search for that text. Is it anywhere else in another topic? But what AI will let you do is let you see if there's semantic duplication. Is this topic talking about the same thing as this other topic, even if they don't share any of the same words? That's the power of AI. That's why it feels magical. So duplication remediation. Imagine if you could slim down your content inventory, lower the amount of items that you have to maintain and take care of, because you're trimming all the fat. You're only keeping the good stuff that's actually effective. Another way you can apply this information is semantic search. So just like we said, is there duplication here on a semantic level? We can actually make sure that users are getting search results based on the semantic meaning of their query and the content. So for example, if I needed to find content related to conflict resolution, like I mentioned before, I put in the search bar conflict resolution. And let's say that there's nothing in my content inventory called content resolution or has that text in there. If there is content that talks about a topic of content resolution, even though it uses different words, that result's going to be returned back to me, and I'm going to be connected to the content that I needed, and hopefully right at the moment of need, as Leslie was talking about. Also, content recommendation, we talked about that a little bit earlier, making sure that when I finish some training or I read a tech doc on a certain product, that a recommendation engine would be able to tell me what I should probably be reading next based on who I am and the content that I've experienced already, maybe my position, maybe my career aspirations. There are a lot of different ways that you could use that information. And there are a lot of different ways that you can use the information of embeddings, those numbers that I was talking about that AI boils the content down to. And we're going to talk about that a lot more in our content intelligence series, but I'm going to pass it back here.
Excellent. Thank you, Dale.
Yeah, thanks, Dale. Great job. So yeah, that covers sort of the content intelligence, and Dale's just scratching the surface here. And as I said, coming back to the point of this webinar was really just sharing our vision across all these different aspects that we're focusing on. If we could spend hours just talking about our ideas and our roadmap around content intelligence and what we want to be including in the products across all our products on a go-forward basis. But the webinar, I believe, in October is going to drill down into this aspect, and we'll share some real examples. We'll share the galaxy map. We'll share some of the actual live things that we're doing on AI to create better content intelligence around your content and how to make it more valuable to end users. So definitely encourage you to sign up. That's an aspect, an area that you're super focused on. How do I make my content more intelligent using AI? Definitely make sure you sign up for that webinar.
Excellent, thank you. So we talked about access to content. So how do we make sure people can feed that content into our different models? I know someone here said, well, what about my proprietary content? I can't use ChatGPT. And we hear that across lots of our customers because you don't want to put into the public domain. But we find as many businesses are really busy right now putting together their own internal secure versions of these models. And what this will allow you to do is within our application, you can pick the model. So right now you just have ChatGPT, but you could pick the internal model and you could use that one instead. So how do we make sure that people can get access to that content? And then how do we make it smarter to match it to the people when and where they need it? So make sure you're getting what's relevant. And the next one, I'm going to pass over to Paul to talk about how can we streamline content creation with Content Assist. Thank you, Paul.
Sure. Thank you, Leslie. Hi, everyone. Nice to sort of meet you all today. Yeah, so I am a writer, and I am going to talk about content assistance. So from the content creator's point of view, there are so many possibilities for what you can do as a content creator with AI. And what we've done here is we've just compiled this kind of short list here of some suggestions, some possibilities. And this, these are categories. And underneath each one of these, there can be more categories and on and on and on. And then this is not even an exhaustive list. At the bottom, you see and more. There are all kinds of things that you could stumble upon in the future as you're working with AI. And of course, when I first learned about AI and ChatGPT, just kind of exploded onto the scene, I thought, oh, this is really cool. And after making it do some silly things, one of the very first questions I had was, well, this is really cool, but can I point this to my own content, my own library of information instead of going out to the internet? Because if I could do that, that would open up all kinds of possibilities. So that's why this whole conversation is pretty exciting, I think. Now, as you're looking at this list, I'm not going to go through in detail, on all of these. We have the webinar later in November where we're going to get into more detail on things, but I am going to focus on a couple of these. I think for the most part, these are pretty self-explanatory in here. And as you start thinking about you as a content creator and how you can use AI, one of the things that I might suggest is that you try to focus on things that are particularly difficult for you to do in content or tedious maybe. For example, look at the first one, content generation. Of course, AI can create new content for you. Are you going to do that? Maybe, maybe not. It can create text, it can create images and video. And so I think about those. I might not use it for that, I'm not sure, but maybe code. Did you know that AI can create code for you? So one of the things that I sometimes have to do in MadCap Flare is add JavaScript. Well, that's not really my central wheelhouse, but I could lean on AI to help me do that. And I find that extremely cool. So I might focus, my energy on something like that. Now, I want to focus in this list. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time on content improvement and content validation, because those happen to be a couple of things that I do use, and where I think there's a lot of opportunity for digging into your proprietary content, because as we say, that's where the real power is. That's where the gold is. So, and these are kind of related to content improvement and content validation. So content validation, all right, you have these rules and these standards and these things that you want to make sure that your content adheres to. And by validating your content using AI, you're improving it. So the lines are kind of blurry here. Now, some of the things that you can do as a content creator with AI are very simple. Very, very simple. And you can use something like ChatGPT going out to the public domain. You can do them today. You can do them for free. And after this list, I will show just a few short examples in screenshots of things. But things like content improvement, maybe simplifying content. That's a big one for people. Of course, you think about spelling, punctuation, grammar, shortening content, lots of things like that. Now, some things that you'll hear people talk about with AI and improving content and validating content, some things might not appeal to you and other things might appeal to you. For example, tone. When I first started hearing about ChatGPT in the content creation industry, I kept hearing people talk about tone. Oh, you can change your tone. You can have AI, affect your tone. Tone this, tone that. And I started thinking about it, and I'm like, for me, I write technical documentation. I don't really see myself doing that. I can't see myself really writing some steps on a software feature and then saying, now make it happy, now make it sad. I just think that's weird. That would be weird for me. Maybe somebody writing other kinds of content, that might be more useful. But voice, it's somewhat related to tone. And I think there's kind of confusion between the two. So voice that's how I write. That's who I am. That is tone. Think of the tone as your mood, and voice is your personality. That's how I write. So your voice might be something like, oh, it's professional, yet maybe somewhat informal. I use these words instead of these words. My sentences tend to be relatively short instead of long, winding sentences. Something like that. There's just the way that you write and the way that your team writes, and you want your content to adhere to that. And sometimes that can be challenging, especially if you've got a team and you got new writers and you all want to be doing the same thing. Well, so how do you do that? Well, with writing samples is one way, and you can actually do this with something like ChatGPT right now. You can take writing samples and you could feed it into ChatGPT and say, hey, this is a sample of my writing. And this other content, which I'm going to give you, I want you to change it so that it is in my writing style. It's in my voice. And it will do that. So that can be really, really cool. But here's why I'm excited about the idea of not just reaching out to the public domain for this is, if I have an AI model, whether it's my own, LLM that I've trained, or I'm using the RAG method that Dale talked about. All right, so that's my proprietary content. It's got writing samples all over the place. All my stuff is in there. All my content is in there. All of my rules are in there. And I'm thinking that could make things much, much easier to do. So I'm very excited about the idea of voice. And then the other part where content validation I get excited about is your rules. So every content writing team that I know of, that I've ever talked to, they are trying to write according to a style guide and internal rules. So a style guide like the Microsoft Manual of Style, most people are using that in technical communications, or you might be the Chicago Manual of Style, something like that. All right, do you have that memorized? No, you don't. You always have to go back and refer to it. Then you have internal rules, because the Microsoft Manual of Style or these other style guides, they don't know your internal rules. You have certain terminology that you use, and we capitalize this one and we don't capitalize that, and we have a space or a hyphen, and there's all these rules that you set up. And our topic structure, what's that supposed to be like? Capitalization, are we using the Oxford comma? All of this stuff, and you don't have that memorized either. I put mine in something I call the documentation Bible, which I've had for years and years and years. And every once in a while, I have to go back to it and go, what did I decide about that 7 years ago? And I have to go look it up. But if I've got all this stuff in an AI model, well, it's going to make things a whole lot easier for me and to validate my content. So I'm going to show you just a couple of examples now. So AI Assist is AI that we have integrated into MadCap Central, so one of MadCap's tools. And this is an example of that. I have opened it up. I'm in a topic. And in this example, I'm asking it, explain accrued interest. Now, most of the time, I might just highlight existing content that I already have, and I want AI to do something with it. But in this example, I'm asking it for some new content. And it gives me an answer. It says, accrued, and I'm sorry if the text is kind of small in here. It's kind of difficult to read, but I'll read some of it for you anyway. Accrued interest refers to the interest that has been incurred on a loan or other financial obligation. All right, my mind's already wandering, and here I'm wondering, when does football season start again? And I'm asking myself, all right, is this a little bit difficult to read in here? And so I ask it in the next section down below, you kind of see towards the bottom, I ask, what reading level is your response? And it gives me an answer. It says, well, the response is, it's approximately US high school reading level, about a 9th, 10th grade reading level. And it says, that's because some of this contains some specialized financial and accounting terminology. Okay, well, I've decided that in my own situation, I like things below a high school reading level, because I'm a big fan of just plain straightforward language. I don't want people to have to go to a dictionary or to Google to figure out what I'm talking about. So I like things to be pretty simple. And that's why I decided I really want things most of the time to be below high school reading level. And sometimes specialized terminology can skew that, and you can get up to, I'll analyze some of my content and it'll say, hey, this is a 10th or 11th grade reading level. And I'll look at it and I go, yeah, I can't really simplify it. My audience will know what I'm talking about because of this industry. But sometimes the buzzwords and the jargon get in the way, or it's just written in a really dry way. So I might ask it here in the prompt, please simplify it for a 5th grade reading level. And it simplifies it. And maybe I like this, maybe I don't, maybe I want to tweak it. So in AI Assist, and this is tapping into ChatGPT again, and we have these tools in here where you can format it and you can go down and you can change it, you can tweak it, and then you can insert it right into your content. So that's one very simple example of simplifying content. Now, let's jump over to AI Positron, which is in the Ixiasoft world, right? So using Oxygen here. And in this example, again, the text is kind of small in this example, but I'll read it for you. So there's some text that's highlighted, and it says, in spring, a vibrant array of flowers is seen blossoming, blooming in gardens and fields. And I didn't write this, by the way. My speech is not this flowery, no pun intended. But there's a lot of passive voice in here. Delicate petals are adorned and trees are decorated. Maybe your rule on your team is we want to use active voice. We don't want passive voice. So over on the right, you can see that we've put in, hey, what's the command? What do we want it to do? We say, replace the selected content with text that's been converted from passive voice to active voice. And it changes it. And so now it says, in spring, a vibrant array of flowers bloom flowers bloom in gardens and fields, delicate petals where droplets of morning dew. Oh, isn't this just beautiful? But it changes things from passive voice to active voice. It says delicate petals wear droplets and blossoms decorate, So it's done what I asked it to do. Now, one of the reasons why I am excited about getting my content into a proprietary, LLM model is that I don't necessarily always want to have to go through everything and say, now do passive, now do active voice, now do Oxford comma, now do this, now do this. I'm thinking that if I have things in this my proprietary content in the model, that it should know who I am, my voice, my rules, and I shouldn't have to work as hard to get it to do these things. So right now I'm set up where I am using AI assist. I'll use ChatGPT. I'm pointing out to the internet. As we sit here, July 18th, 2024, I am not set up yet with my proprietary content, tapping into that for AI, but that's why I'm excited, and that's why I like, this vision moving forward. So now I am actually going to pass it back. Oh, and this is one more screenshot before I do that. One thing that AI Assist and AI Positron do is they can show you a before and after, which is really useful. So if you change content, you can see what's highlighted and the differences before and after. And it really rewrote the thing. I am now going to pass it back to Dale, who's going to talk a little bit about Xyleme Sidekick.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me? Just quick check. Okay, great. I'm sorry, my webcam is not working. It decided to die right in the middle of the webinar, but you can hear me, and that's the important part. Yeah, so Xyleme Sidekick is taking a little bit of a different approach to the chatbot paradigm that Paul was just showing, both in Central and XCCMS. And what we're doing instead is we're trying to provide a way for organizations to get their specialized tools down into the flow of work for their content teams. And whether or not those tools are powered by AI is not really Sidekick's concern, but instead it just wants to make sure that your content teams can get access to the tools that they need to meet your content goals. But those tools can be AI powered. So for example, one of the default tools provided with Sidekick is a summarize tool. And that is powered by a large language model in the background. And so you can see selected some documents on the right there, and on the left side, you see that summaries were provided for them. But the point is that this is using a familiar user experience, a paradigm that doesn't really evoke AI. It's just a click a button to perform an action way of going about things. And the end user didn't need to know that AI was being used in the background. But in this case, it was. And it was being used by sending to a ChatGPT large language model that is secure and local. It is not the public one up on OpenAI. But we allow that configuration as well. If an organization wants to use their version of an LLM, we want to be able to facilitate that. If they want to be able to add new tools to Sidekick, we want to facilitate that as well. And so, as Paul was just saying, maybe you want to change the reading level or change the voice to active voice. You can add a tool in there, an action called change voice. Or you could take advantage of that and the proprietary content and say normalize. So your organization could create a normalize tool that takes advantage of the fact that it's connected to the content library and understands what the tone and the voice is used in the rest of your content library. And the user just clicks normalize, and it shows them a normalized version of their content. So it's a slightly different paradigm in terms of user experience, but it's still focused on getting the tools into the flow of work for your content teams. And we just think that's a really, really important goal to achieve. So I'm actually going to pass it back to Leslie to, I believe, close us out.
And actually, Dale, due to time, since we only have 2 minutes left, I'm going to pass it right to Dippo, and we'll just kind of skip a little bit of the wrap up so he can talk about what's next.
Hi, yes, I was keeping it was just so interesting, I just could not, but we're running out of time. I would like to invite you all to make sure that you sign up for the following episodes. I mean, we started off with this one on the overall MadCap strategy for AI and content. In September, on September the 12th, we'll be running one on content access. So that is basically how and all the things to look at in preparing to start giving access to your content using some of our tools. And we'll talk a lot more about it. Go on to our AI portal. That should have been there. Make sure you visit our AI portal. We've got loads of resources on there. You'll have links to the recording. You can download white papers and so on that we've written on there. And make sure you register for the September the 12th content access episode. Now, we have run out of time. I see loads of questions in the question panel. We did manage to answer some of those directly, and in order not to keep you all hanging on way past your, well, for me, it's bedtime, we'll be sending answers to all these questions to you all along with the recording. So let me just bring everyone back up online, and we can say our goodbyes. And we've missed question and answer session, guys, I'm afraid. Oh yeah, we can't have Dale on. He lost his camera, but have you got sound, Dale?
I'm here. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Anthony,
really
would you like to
time.
just say a closing word?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your time for joining us. As Deepa mentioned, this was a very high-level overview of the strategy in terms of what we're focusing on, in terms of the 3 areas. But each episode is a deep dive into each of those 3. So if one of them is super exciting or interesting for you, definitely join it. And as I keep an eye on the AI portal, because we're going to keep adding information to that portal. So I appreciate everybody's time taking away from your daily work schedules. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Make sure you sign up for the next one. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.